Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Southeast Media Sunrise, dedicated to giving a voice to authors of all genres. I'm your host, Jodi Hockinson. Today we have with us Mary Lou Cheatham, author of Deep from the Heart. Mary Lou Cheatham, also known as Mary Cook, began her life on a Mississippi farm north of Hot Coffee and south of Taylorsville. Her family spent their winter evenings playing games, reading, and conversing by the fireplace. Mary's parents, two of the world's greatest storytellers, bequeathed a legacy of yarn spinning to their children and grandchildren. When she was 10 years old, Mary decided she wanted to be an author. Life took her down other paths. After graduating from the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg, she taught English in Greensville, Mississippi, and Ruston, Louisiana. Later, she attended Louisiana Tech University and became a registered nurse. So tell us about your newest novel, Deep from the Heart.
Okay. Hello, how are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
Great. Deep from the Heart is a romantic suspense. It was published in March by Southeast Media Productions.
Okay, tell us a little bit about what the book's about.
All right. Well, let's just talk about the title for a second. It's deep in the heart of Texas, and it comes deep from her heart and deep from the heart of the people who are touched by her life. The main character is Ava Molino. She is a young single Methodist minister, and she leaves the comfort of her hometown in Mississippi, and she travels west to go to live in a little town called Flat Rock, Texas. She's going to pastor a small-town church there. She meets an interesting young man and runs into trouble for trying to keep the downtrodden, to help the downtrodden in her church community. She'll defy your expectations of what a church pastor is like. First of all, she's a woman. She's a millennial, and she talks like one. She stands up for herself, no matter who attacks her. Although she believes in having a good time, she defends her moral values.
Mm-hmm.
The decisions she makes dump her into a quagmire of inescapable trouble.
So you're talking about the downtrodden in her church community. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
All right. When she shows up at the church, most of the people who are attending the church are just a few elderly people who are coming there and bringing their grandchildren. And she's looking for some ways to help this church to serve that community. It's an imaginary community. It's not exactly like any other place on earth. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it's outside of Lubbock, Texas, which in the book is called Laramie, because I don't want people looking for things exactly the way they are. All right, back to the church. It's a fantastic old building. The outside of it looks great, except the roof is caving in, and the few people that go there try to keep it going. Maybe 24 people attend on a Sunday. But it's a community that's teeming with people. They're people. They're homeless people everywhere she turns. In this town, there are quite a few Hispanics who have come there, and they don't have anywhere to live except in the worst houses imaginable, and she wants to reach out to them and help them. She finds also some elderly people who need help. Some of these are disabled veterans. She runs across a young girl who is pregnant, and she has to tell her parents, ends up dropping out of school. So she just sees all these people who need help, and she makes up her mind that she's going to help them no matter what. And some of the important people in the church, or the people who think they're important, really don't welcome people like that into their church.
That's interesting that you should say that, because when I read this book, one thing that really impressed me was the fact that Ava Molino is she's more of a be like Jesus instead of say you're going to be like Jesus. When she wants to help somebody, it's a given. She just is there to help people, and that's just what she knows how to do, and she does it well.
Right. And she's not a person who has quite a bit of confidence in herself. She's very intelligent, but she doesn't think she is superior to anybody. In fact, she feels a little inferior. She thinks she's never run into Mr. Right. She went to college and she shopped around, but nobody was the right guy for her. And she's attractive, but she's been relying on food for her comfort. And she's I think a lot of us are that way these days, and I wanted to have somebody that people could identify with. So she has the challenge of being overweight and eating all the wrong things. That's her biggest flaw, probably. She's a
So,
little impulsive at times.
okay. So let's talk a little bit about Mary Cheatham. Tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I never know what to say. You told some of the important things about me already.
So you live in Louisiana. Were you affected by the
Right.
hurricanes last year?
No, I live up in North Louisiana. Last night we had a little storm somewhere close by, and we were without electricity for 3 hours.
Oh, goodness.
So I'm just glad that happened last night instead of tonight. I hope we don't have thunder in the background.
So I understand you write using your previous name, Mary Lou Cheatham, and
Right.
tell us about your current name.
Okay. Mary Cook. I'm married to John Cook. We've been married for 3 years. John is very supportive and helpful. He has designed some of my book covers. And speaking of book covers, the one for Deep from the Heart is really neat, and that was designed by you. And I really like it.
Well, thank you.
The landscape looks very much like the landscape in this part of West Texas.
Let's talk about what kind of characters do you like to write about?
I like to write about the downtrodden, the people who have to rise above their circumstances. And I hope that they will do that in my books. They usually do, if not in this life, in the next. I've written about a young man who was beaten by his father until he passed out. A young woman beaten by her father because she's a disappointment to him because he thinks she's unattractive and because she's not a boy. Families with alcoholics in them. Many of my books take place in the early 1900s. Of course, Deep from the Heart is a contemporary book. In the 1900s, I wrote about Italian immigrants who were afraid of being lynched because they were taking jobs away from other people. I've written about sons and daughters of slaves in the early 1900s. I had quite a bit of fun working with a friend, Sarah Walker Garrell, writing a book about the gypsies, or as they prefer to be called, the Roma people. And they're the most oppressed people throughout the history of the world. I don't know if you heard last week, the Pope was making a statement of showing his concern about how the Roma people have been treated throughout times. In modern times, it's just easy for me to move to talking about the Hispanic illegals. And I'm not doing this with any idea of political significance. I don't really have any politics in my writing. I'm more concerned about how the individuals are affected by what goes on and how they live and how we should treat them.
Well, as you know,
The
I've read
people around us, no matter who they are and no matter how they got here, we need to look at the needs of those around us.
Yeah, as you may know, I've read several of your books, and I've noticed that they don't seem like there's a political agenda, just that you are concerned truly with anyone who is downtrodden and in that kind of a situation, and different things that could take place for them to rise up out of that.
Right. The people who are suffering and struggling, and the people who go unnoticed by the people that are around them.
So tell me, what's your favorite book?
I love The Pearl by John Steinbeck.
Oh, no kidding. Mm-hmm.
I used this book when I was teaching. 10th graders just love this story. It's very poetic. Every word serves a purpose in the book. A real economy of words. Steinbeck captures the soul and spirit of a Mexican man who's trying to take care of his family. He's a pearl diver, and he finds the biggest pearl in the world. And he was mistreated, and he has his little child is sick, and he's trying to survive, and he has to escape into the mountains. I wish I could write like that. It's not my style, but it'd be nice.
Well, it's nice that you've used that as a role model, though, and I see a lot of poetic prose, even though you say you don't write like that. I see a lot of nice wording in your writing, for sure.
Oh, thank you.
Now you mentioned that that you're not really political. Would you like to discuss your opinions about politics?
Not really. I'm just more interested in looking at the people around us and caring for them. You know, I live in the deep South, and I grew up in a time. Well, I wrote a little book. I don't think you've read this one, probably. Manuela Blaine. Have you read that one?
No, I've started it. I haven't finished it yet.
It's about a little girl, but I had someone record it who had a childlike voice.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little African American girl, and she was the best friend of a character named Trudy, who shows up in several of my books.
In the Covington Chronicles series, right?
Right, in the Covington Chronicles series. Trudy could play with Manuela out in the country, and she was a neighbor, and they had a good time, but when they went to town, if she saw Manuela, she was expected not to see her.
Oh, and I'm going to stop you.
To her.
I'm going to stop you right there and tell our listeners the Covington Chronicles series that we're talking about are the historical fiction books that Mary was talking about that take place in the 1900s. So please continue.
Okay. So this is early 1900s, and so where was it? This is just the kind of people that I like to show, and that's my politics. It's mostly about the people who are with me. I went through a time back in the early 70s, and I was teaching, and I went from just having one little miserable African-American child in a classroom to a school system that became 95% black, with the whites going to a special academy across town. Having grown up in the country, like I'm talking about in South, this was in the Mississippi Delta, and having grown up in South Mississippi and really knowing and understanding the community that the African Americans that were around me and growing to love them, I had an easy time being accepted by my students and accepting them. They used to call me their blue-eyed soul sister.
Aww.
I thought that was kind of sweet. But I'm just a person who believes in loving the people that we are with, no matter what is going on with them. And then when I went to nursing school, there was a big point made about being non-judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
That we had to learn to take care of people, no matter what their problems were, no matter what their illnesses were, or how they got whatever they had. And I guess when I finally reached the point in my life where I wanted to sit down and start writing, all this came to me without me realizing that this is what I wanted to write about.
Oh, that's wonderful. So tell me what role does recording a book play in your writing process?
Oh, well, first let me tell you something. I'm an auditory learner. It goes back, I guess, to my childhood. My parents sat around, and I believe this is what people are supposed to do. People sat around campfires back in prehistoric times, and they told stories, and everybody sat and listened. And this is the way I grew up. We didn't have television. We didn't have a lot of modern conveniences, and we sat and listened to our parents tell stories.
Mm-hmm.
Usually our hands were busy preparing food. And my parents, I think, were two of the best storytellers I've ever heard. And their stories come to me all the time when I'm looking for something to write. I don't have to do research because I have all those stories in my mind. Well, when I went back to school when I was 40, and I became a registered nurse when I was 42.
Uh-huh.
And I had a little tape recorder, and it was my best friend. It stayed with me all the time. And I recorded my lectures, and I listened over and over to my professors as they talked. And my family always knew, my daughter and my first husband, who has passed away, they always knew when I was studying for a test because they'd come home and find the house spotless.
Because you clean while you listened.
I was brought up that way. I had to do something with my hands while I was engaging my ears. So I think language is really, unless we're just learning an ancient language like ancient Latin or Greek or something like that, language is meant to be spoken and heard. So this has influenced my writing. If a book doesn't sound good, it's not written well. And I listen as I write. I wear my headphones, and the computers are so convenient now. There's just a little key up there I can click on and play what I have just written and play it back, and I see so many of the mistakes that way. I think this is one of the things that would be a big help with writers if they would just learn to listen to themselves as they go. And if it doesn't sound good, they need to go back and do it again. I write my books to be recorded. And Jodi, if you remember, this is the way I met you.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking for someone to record my books, and you were just too good to be true. I listened to you, and I just could not believe the wonderful job that you did. And you don't do it unless you want to, but if you want to, there can be a little Southern in your voice. But you don't have to talk Southern, but you can if you want to. And so far, you've recorded 6 books for me. Actually, 5 full-length books and 1 poem. I think the first one you recorded for me was it Secret Promise? It was the Courtship of Miss Loretta Larson.
Yeah,
those were in the series, and you did a beautiful job of those. Then,
thank
Travelers,
you.
which is I love the way you did those. Travelers and Painted Wagons on Cohay Creek. It's another one. The Travelers, that's another word that people like to call
the gypsies.
Gypsies. Right. Usually there's a word that we call people, especially the downtrodden or the oppressed or the ones we discriminated against. We don't even realize that we're calling them something that's insulting. For example, the word Eskimo is not really a kosher word. But anyway, back to the Travelers and Painted Wagons.
So I had not realized that I had recorded that many for you. So you have, and these are just a fraction of all the books that you've written.
Right. And I was going to say something about Travelers and Painted Wagons on Cohay Creek. We talked Craig and your sweet husband into helping us with this one because we decided we wanted a man to record part of it. And he did a beautiful job. But I believe he said that was the last time he was going to do that.
He did. That was his first and last, but he gave it his all, and I think he really came out well on that, and he did a nice job.
He did. I had so much fun doing that book. I know I'm off the subject right now. I loved learning about the Roma people and what they had gone through, and it was just a delightful thing.
Well, I certainly learned a lot of things in that book that I had no idea about. It gave me a new viewpoint towards gypsies. Not that I really was ever prejudiced against them, but I didn't know anything about them, and this just made I felt a lot more educated about them, and I gained a respect for them that I didn't have before.
Yes.
So I appreciated that.
Sometimes I feel like each book is about the equivalent of graduate level college class, the amount of material that I have to go through and what I learned.
Yeah, that is something about your books. I'm always learning something, an interesting fact that I didn't know before. That's something I really love about your books. I'm just being entertained, but by the end of the book, I discovered that I've learned quite a few things.
And that's really something that I was thinking about. Writing is really entertainment. It's just no more than a pretty song or a nice picture or whatever, but the purpose of it is just to entertain, actually. Then I wrote a couple of books about the church that you have recorded for me. As Doves Fly in the Wind.
Mm-hmm.
And this one takes place in South Louisiana, excuse me. The story is about a young man who is a minister in a church that could be non-denominational or maybe Baptist. I don't really say. And then I wrote Deep from the Heart about a young Methodist minister. So I have 2 preacher books there. And the only other thing I think you recorded for me was a poem, a little short poem called Mr. Bobby's Cat.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's all you've recorded me.
So tell me, what are your future writing plans?
Okay, I'm working on something that's called a time slip. I started getting into this a little bit. It's sort of a new thing. I started getting into this when I was writing Travelers and Painted Wagons on Cohay Creek, because if you remember, I went back into the earlier times, trying to give a little of the history of the Roma people as they came from India over across Europe.
Mm-hmm.
This is writing becoming very popular, where you write about one time period and then you refer to another time period in the same book. Well, this new book I'm working on called New American World is like that. It's taking place in the 2020s, and it also takes place in the 1920s.
Oh.
And I was thinking today, maybe a better name for this, I've never heard anybody use this, would be a generational novel for this one, because it goes through generations. It's about a young woman named Casey, and Casey is in the new part, and the old part is about her grandmother 100 years before.
Interesting. Okay.
Would you like for me to tell you a little bit about what that book is about?
Sure.
I'm really excited about it, and I'm busy writing it every day. I work on this one a little bit. Casey lives in the 2020s, early 2020s. She has superior intelligence. She's not Superman or anything like that. I mean, she may remind you of the old Superman stories and Clark Kent. But she's just a normal young woman with a typical West Texas family. She works for the United States as a diplomat.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not somebody who's living in a fancy house or anything. She's just a normal person with a normal family. And she's a diplomat at large, which means she works all over the world, and her job is solving problems that threaten to destroy our country and then the world. She has specific things she works on: pollution, primarily pollution of our oceans. I'm big on this one lately, about the plastic bags showing up on the beaches and drinking straws and all that. I'm sure you've heard plenty about it. And she's also interested in diseases, communicable diseases, childhood diseases. And now she's had a new thing added to her list, which is a revolutionary secession. Some evil guy who's a retired Air Force general has coerced a little section of the United States to secede from the Union, and he is thinking that from where his standpoint that he can take over the United States.
Oh, very interesting.
She is the one who's put in charge of this. The president is hiding out the United States is hiding in a bunker because he's afraid he's going to get killed and stuff. So they send her out to do these really difficult jobs, and she has the ability, but she doesn't have the self-confidence. She lacks the courage to do it. So, as I said, she's an ordinary woman. She's not a superhero, but she has a few super things, like she has an amazing car, and she has a bag of weapons, and I'm having fun with this. It's a little bit of science fiction kind of thing. And my husband, John, is really having to help me with this because he watches more TV than I do. And she has above average physical strength, and she has a watch that just does everything. Do you remember Dick Tracy's watches?
I do.
Maybe you're too young for that.
We're aging ourselves.
But she and her husband have modified lenses so they have supervision. But super vision. They can see extra well. But otherwise she's just like anybody else, and nobody notices her much. As time goes by, her assignments become more severe, and she gets into more trouble. She just likes to cringe and hide away and nurse her headaches because all this gives her headaches. The one quality she needs that she doesn't have is courage. And she remembers her grandmother, Lena. When she was a little girl, Granny Lena used to come see her, and they would tie pillowcases around their necks or towels or whatever, and they'd run through the yard, pretend they were superheroes. And Granny Lena died when she was a teenager. She reads her grandmother's letters and journals, and she sees how her grandmother handled problems that seemed insurmountable. And Lena's story takes place in the 1920s. her grandmother had to drop out of school when she was in the 8th grade. And I'm not giving too much of the story away to make it a spoiler, but she had to take care of the family.
Mm-hmm.
And every time things get really rough for Casey, she just goes and reads about her grandmother. Well, that's one thing I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
And did you want to know what else I would plan to write? Or
Yes. What other books do you plan to write?
Well, I plan to write a book about Bubba. And Bubba is my daughter Christy's dog. And the neighbor, we wrote a story about Bubba the fire dog.
Mm-hmm.
A little children's book, and Christy drew the pictures for it. Well, Bubba takes a walk every day with Christy, and one of the neighbors actually went and bought a cap for Bubba. It's like a military cap or something like that. And fitted to his head. He's mostly black lab. I think he may have some German Shepherd in there or something. So we were thinking about writing another story for Bubba, and they practically have the book written for me. And I thought, I have to get to that. Then maybe another devotional book or study book. I wrote one that's just really sort of a private thing about the same time that Deep from the Heart came out. And it's called Cultivating the Fruit of the Spirit. And my Sunday school class has been using it. It's just a little workbook kind of discussion thing.
Uh-huh.
It was very easy to do. And then I was promised by family I would do a family memoir, but I haven't gotten very far with that. I have a nephew who likes to write, too. We're kindred spirits. He lives in Georgia, and his name is Jameson Gregg. In 2014, he was selected as the Georgia Author of the Year in his category, which is humor. And he's already written a really neat piece for my book, and some other cousins have told me stories about my family. And it's just supposed to be a family memoir, and I just haven't been able to get myself in that track. I have too many things I'm trying to do.
And just aren't enough hours in the day, are there?
Right, 2 other books. Exactly. And I'm going to use another pen name for these. They're a little bit, how should I say it? Not really racy. They have some things that are kind of involve some controversy.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to have another name. One of them is about something that happened. It's a true story, and the only way I can tell it is to have a pen name.
Okay.
And that's true about the other one, too. Both of them have things that I cannot.
So I won't ask you more about those.
Well, how about you, Jodi? I know you wrote a wonderful book, and I've read it. And
well, thank you. Between Two Worlds. Mm-hmm.
Between Two Worlds. What else do you plan to write?
I'm actually working on a sequel to that. That's a story about, it's from the Lion Clan series, and Between Two Worlds is book 1, and I'll be writing book 2, which is kind of a sequel and a prequel. It's going to talk about how this story came about in the first place, and then continue on from where it left off in the last book. Back to you. Tell me, when do you like to write? What's a good environment for you?
Well, most of the people that I know who are successful writers have their own little studios that are all closed up, and we are moving to Ransom Canyon, which is just outside of Lubbock. And in the new house, I'm going to have a little office, but I probably won't stay in it. I don't stay in my office now. I'd rather be at the kitchen table where I can keep up with what's going on. And if the television gets too loud, I just put my earphones on, and I might play music that is relevant to what I'm writing, and it gets me in the mood.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I can kind of make a bubble around myself wherever I am. And maybe it's because I was one of 5 when I was growing up, and I like a lot of people around, commotion. If it gets too quiet, my mind goes blank. So I like to be around people. I read a book several years ago. Actually, I listened to the tapes by Stephen King. It was a book about how to write. And he said that he could write anywhere at any time. And if he went on trips, he would manage, if it was just to get out in the hall and write by candlelight or something, he would do it. Because he likes to be flexible. I think I have that kind of flexibility. And I'm trying to make that my practice. Like I said, if a place is not too noisy, I just can't do it. If it gets too noisy, then I turn I shut out the noise.
Mm.
Uh, I prefer to use my laptop, and it's wonderful. I just don't know how people wrote before they had computers. It must have been difficult. But if I'm going along, go ahead.
My first 4 books that I wrote were pre-computer books. Even though computers were around then, I wasn't comfortable with writing in them. I wrote in notebooks.
Were these nonfiction books
that
you were?
Yeah.
And those were the books about nutrition?
Yeah, so for people with gout.
Right. If I'm somewhere and I think of something about my book, I will maybe get my cell phone out and send myself an email, or maybe just do the little notepad that's in the phone. Use that.
Mm-hmm.
Or I might use a hotel notepad, fill those up. Or I carry a spiral notebook with me sometimes when I have to stay somewhere for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the best writing equipment, what we have without the computer.
Yeah, sometimes I feel that way. All right, looks like we're about out of time. Would you like to add anything?
Well, just one more thing about when I write. If a day passes and I don't write, I feel like a failure. And at this time in my life, my writing is my calling, it's my profession. It's what I want to do. So the best answer to that question about when do I write is every day.
That's wonderful. So again, we're talking to Mary Lou Cheatham. Anyone interested in purchasing her book, Deep from the Heart, can log in to semediapro.com or visit Amazon. That's Mary Lou Cheatham, author of Deep from the Heart. This is Jodi Hockinson, Southeast Media Productions. Like us on Facebook at Southeast Media Productions or visit our website at semediapro.com.